We're about to dive into another episode of Running with Scissors, the podcast that helps you understand who and what you truly are in the world. Buckle up as we unpack strategies to unlock your full potential so you can stop running with scissors and get the most out of your life, work, and relationships. Let's go!
What's up, Way?
What's happening? Just the other day, I had somebody use the term running with scissors in a conversation.
There we go.
And this is before they even knew what it is that I do, right? We started going to existential conversations about life and everything like that. And they literally said, I sometimes feel like I'm running around, going through life, running with scissors and just doing what I can not to fall on it. And having my attention be distracted by whatever scissors is in front of me.
That's incredible. I love it. Very dangerous. Please, I don't encourage this at all.
And so I had to say what it is that the podcast, and it's like, oh my God, I can't wait till this I can get access to this, right? And I said, but it totally makes sense. He goes, no kidding. This is why you're not the first person I've said this to, because it feels like that. And when you guys came up with this, I think you came up with this, right? This name, running with scissors, and the metaphorical representation. I was like, what? But now that I'm hearing it out there, again, it's probably a reticular activator system. So I probably heard it before, and I just like, yeah. But it's cool. It's just a little thing I wanted to share.
I love it. Yeah, I've been seeding it in conversations as a guest on other podcasts, and every time I say it, people are like, "Oh, that's such a cool phrase. That's such a cool name for a podcast."
Right?
I'm like, yeah. Now think about it. Really dissect it. That's what you're doing by not knowing yourself, other people, and they're like, "Oh, now I'm a little scared. Now I have to listen to the podcast."
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like if you have, let's say someone is learning how to drive a car and they get put into a cyber truck and they have no idea the potential issues you could do driving it haphazardly, going through the streets, right? It's like driving a miniature tank, right? I mean, it's kind of like that. And what happens is, what we see in the world is when people don't invest in understanding themselves throughout life, right? And what we're saying is what I'm saying is that personal development and personal growth, it really shouldn't be a nice to have or as like a luxury that I can or cannot afford. It needs to be incorporated as a lifestyle component. It's like part of your life to be doing this through all the intervals of your life, right?
Yeah, and if you voluntarily get in or buy a Cybertruck, you need way more personal development than most other people. Like, why? What? I'm just
no
saying.
Judgment, no bias. Everybody to each their own.
Maybe a little bit from me, but I'm working on it. Okay. We got a quick episode today. We're gonna go through the bottommost section of your app results, the core stats on the homepage, on your dashboard, wherever you're looking at the app. It's the perception of life and your energy pool. So the question, Way, is there a way using this technology to gain access to infinite energy? And I say yes, as long as you snort a lot of cocaine. But outside of that, is that possible?
Like with anything else organic and living, there's a finite amount of energy that is accessible from one day to the next. Ergo, why else would there be a day and night? Why there would be nocturnal beings versus daily animals? And human beings are no different. We absolutely have a finite amount of energy in our tank, a gas tank, if you will. Right? I mean, if you have electric car or a gas-powered car, also known as an ICE, internal combustion engine, there is a limit to how far you can drive before you literally run out of energy or gas. Human beings are no different. Understanding that is a huge component, which is that energy pool component, right? Now, if you have taken the assessment and you haven't accessed your core stats or seen the results, Lisa, who's our master trainer of the technology, she did a fantastic job explaining, kind of doing an overview of the perception. Trey, we get to dive into a little bit of geekery today, maybe. And then
Please.
also about the energy pool side. And again, you could look at the core stats, you could look at your basic summary results, but you really need to jump into the customized videos results that you have in the full results section. Go there, watch that, take that in, take notes, and then start applying that in your life. And if you want to know how to apply that, there's another podcast that's inside the app where you go to the specific section that talks about every section. Lisa and I go in deep and talking about different strategies you could do to maximize your understanding of yourself when it comes to each section, like perception of life and like the energy pool.
Yeah, Lisa's way cooler than me. That's why she
sounds better than
she's
both
smarter
of
than
us.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why she's on the podcast within the app. Definitely go check those out. But I want to dive into the geekery because these two areas, especially in the workplace, I think are commonly misunderstood and where a lot of conflict can come from. So
Yeah.
Let's start with the energy pool. That's a big one. You have two people
Mhm.
side by side. One has a larger energy pool than another, and they get unfairly compared to each other.
Yeah.
And you're just setting people up for failure. You might even be setting up the person with the larger energy pool for failure because they could perform way more than they are, but they're being held to a lower standard. So
Right.
we're opening up so many doors to future features in the app, but why don't we dive into first the science and the geekery behind energy pool and what these numbers mean?
Yeah. So the numbers are representative. You can almost think of the number next to your energy pool designation in terms of above excellent, excellent, or average or fair. Those are the different categories that every human being potentially falls into. And then you'll see a number around that. You could think of that as the how many gallons you have in your gas tank, basically, right? Optimally, most human beings, when they're operating at an optimal level, depending on their size of their vehicle, so it really depends on a combination of a multiple factors, right? The larger the vehicle, and I don't mean like just physically larger, but if we go back to talking about traits, we look at how prominent and how high those numbers are in terms of the characteristic traits. That all comes into play when we're talking about, the size of your energy pool, and also the volume that comes through in terms of the emphasis of your motivational drivers, those nuclear force drivers. Now, if we're talking about nuclear force, if you go back to science and think about what nuclear forces are responsible for, in a simplest way to describe it, nuclear forces is responsible for holding molecules together. It's literally the foundation, what keeps things together. So when you feed your drivers into the strength, you're reinforcing the stability of the molecular makeup of your entire being. And so if there's a large nuclear force expression that it lives within you, and I think typically you can expect that if you look at your motivational drivers and you see like 4s there instead of just 3, so it's either 3 or 4. So when you see 4s there and stuff like that, there's a high potential that you will require a lot of gas in your gas tank, or a larger gas tank, to be able to maintain the foundation and power your vehicle. Okay. So in what that number then represents is the amount of energy you have to work with every single day before you have to go to sleep and rejuvenate, or take extra steps into feeding your drivers a little bit more if you can't go to sleep yet, just to get through the rest of the day. So when we look at that and we see someone who has, say, for example, a 25-gallon gas tank, and then you have someone, say, for example, like me, that has a 44-gallon gas tank, and then we are put into like a sales team, and then like our bosses look at what I'm producing on a day-to-day basis versus the person who's only got a 25-gallon tank producing, and they say, hey, in order for you to move up in the echelons, you got to perform at Way's level, not realizing, of course, that, well, I have almost double the amount of energy that person has. It's only natural that I'll do more without burning out, right? And so what'll happen is, if you look in the workforce of today, where people who have small energy pools or smaller energy pools, there's nothing right or wrong with that, not good or bad. It's just the nature of how they're designed. Pushing them to perform beyond their energy pool is a recipe for burnout, okay? And if the individual does not have access to HumanOp and they don't know to set boundaries, saying, no, that's beyond my capability. Unless you want me to burn out, yeah, give me those metrics to go by. Then that's what happens. That's how organizations burn out people with, I mean, we had a situation where we were working with a client and they had hired this front desk receptionist who was also an admin assistant to run around the office. And they said in the beginning, she was phenomenal. She was great. She did such great work. They kept adding more to her plate that needed to be done in the same amount of time she had every single day. So about a year or so later, said, we don't know what's going on with her. You know, is she okay? Blah, blah, blah. And so we took a look at her HumanOp results and we're like, well, the reason why she performed so well in the beginning, because she only had so much to do, but she had the energy to do it. You guys are giving her the workload of someone with twice her energy pool. She's going to burn out. And that's why things are falling through the cracks. And they said, what? It's that simple? Yeah. Take things off her plate, things that shouldn't have been stacked on there, or get her help. So what they did was they moved things off back to where they originally were supposed to go. And her quality of work immediately improved, right? Similarly, if you know someone has a huge energy pool and they are underutilized, this is where you have people with large, and this happened to me a lot when I was working in corporate America. I was underutilized over and over again, and I would just get bored. I'd get disengaged. I would check out. It wasn't like I wasn't doing great work. I didn't have enough work to do. And so then when there's not enough engagement and the utilization of that energy still needs to be used in order for that human being to stay optimized. And so I started using it in different directions. And if there was no way for me to advance myself, using energy to advance myself quicker in the organization, because that's usually what I did. I usually would just jet up the echelon really fast. I would go up and beyond everything because I had the energy to do it. And eventually I left because I was completely disengaged. They couldn't keep up and give me enough to do. Right.
Which also, to be fair, is that old model that we're trying to disrupt a little bit, because you were compared to everybody else. So your bigger energy pool allowed you to do more, be more productive, get better results, bigger results, whatever it may be. So you're naturally better, air quotes, than everybody else, and you move up. Maybe that wasn't even the right seat or the right role for you, but traditionally measured, you're better than everyone else.
Right. Well, I had more energy to work with, so I could do more within the same amount of time. Yeah. Right. This was most prevalent every time I took a sales job. At some point, once I got a good understanding of how to sell, I still remember there was this company I was working at where they would do these monthly contests, sales contests, right? And they would every week or even every day, they would talk about the standings of where everybody, because sales were done every single day. Well, there was one particular quarter where they were doing a sales competition, and I stopped hearing the updates. And then aside from the fact that I was winning every contest once I found out how to sell whatever it is I was selling, right? And it was like tech and IT stuff. What happened was they stopped. I said, hey, boss, why did you stop posting the contest, stats so that we can see where we're at? She says, because you're so far ahead of second place that it's demoralizing. So we stopped doing it because we saw it was actually discouraging people from even trying to sell anything. I was like, damn it. It's like, no, we'll still honor the contest, but now I think so. They ended up launching a different contest after that. One contest was performance based. One contest was you get to be randomly picked. if you do a certain amount of performance, you get put into a drawing and then you get picked, right? So it becomes more randomized.
You gotta love the participation trophy. It's always good.
And it was hilarious because the first month they did that, I still won both.
Oh.
Because they did it so that if you hit your goals enough times, you get multiple entries into the drawing.
Okay. Well, I don't want to make you feel bad. I don't think we should take away contests from you. So how about this? For you listening or watching, we're gonna have a contest right now. If you downloaded the HumanOp app because of me, put Brandon in the comments. If it was because of Way, put Way in the comments. And we'll see who wins. It's a free app, so there's really no losing here for you.
Yeah. But anyway, the whole point of those stories was to understand that when you can understand the energy pool that you have to work with, whether you are a business owner hiring somebody who has a big energy pool, or you yourself has a large energy pool, or you don't have a large energy pool and you have like a smaller energy pool, understanding that will help you optimize your day by understanding what to put on your plate and what not to put on your plate, given the finite amount of energy you have to work with and the finite amount of time you have to work with, right? And a lot of that also depends, remember, going back to the motivational driver conversation, is that, yes, you have a gas tank size, but is it filled all the way with the right energy, right? So what you want to also look at that is like, if you do have a big energy tank and you say, and you look at your results of, well, I have a pretty big energy tank. Why am I exhausted all the time? Probably because you're not filling your gas tank. So if you have a big gas tank, there's a caveat that requires you to feed your drivers more than someone who has a smaller gas tank. And by that virtue, so what I learned to do with my understanding of my vehicle of self is that I created a business structure, and you guys keep supporting that so that I can spend most of my time doing activities that feed my driver into strength so I can maintain a full tank of gas to work with every single day.
Yeah, it's incredibly important to do that. So let's talk, before we move on to perception of life, high level strategy. Let's go back to the example you gave before. You have a 44 energy pool, you have a 25 energy pool, same role, doesn't really matter what the role is. How do you compensate for that as a leader so that you're not unjustly holding the 25 energy pool to the same standard as the 44, or whatever the two numbers may be?
Well, one of the most important things, what'll make it a lot easier for leaders, is to make sure, like, if you have those two team members or employees, all three of you take the assessment and have a meeting, sit down and just focus on looking at that, like a energy pool meeting, right? Let's look at the energy output capabilities, and then work together to set unique goals that are unique to that individual. So what that organization could have done is that, you know, because my energy pool is 44, they will set a much higher goal that's personal to me, not for anybody else. And honestly, if they did that, I don't care. I was like, yeah, I'll hit that. That's not a big deal because I've been hitting that anyway, right? But then if they look at somebody else who has a small energy pool by, say, half the factor, right, or a third, then just go by that metric first and see how they happen, right? Now, we are currently working on an algorithm to give a lot more precision to this. But even before that comes out, as a leader, you can start playing with those. If you have those numbers in front of each other and you guys are having this open discussion, then it's going to resonate with each of those people. It's not going to be like a fairness to comment because you're looking at each other's results. What makes it a little challenging is if only one person has taken the assessment and the other person has no idea what's going on. I mean, if you've already taken the assessment and you're listening to this, you'll notice there's a specific vernacular and the language pattern that we use to talk about human beings. And it's all on purpose. The reason why we do that, scientifically, we over the last 20 years observed colloquially, like, what is the language set or the language that human beings have created that has the highest level of potential objectivity, so that we don't have to deal with too much of colloquial slang or cultural, pop cultural meaning that's attached, or charge meaning that's attached to certain words. And so having everybody having taken the assessment and then just focusing on that, okay, this energy pool is 35, this energy pool is 25, we've got to adjust a little bit because we got to see how much that we can do, and we can play with it. And so it could be like a kind of an ongoing game. So I'm going to give you 10 things to do today. Let's see how you do over the next week or so, and see if that's enough or too much, right? And then you adjust accordingly. Same thing with the person with the larger pool. Let's put 20 things on there because you've done that before. Or if they've done that before, and say, hey, let's add a little bit more and see if you can still keep up with that with your energy pool. And then as time goes on, it will equalize, and then you'll find that happy place. Again, our algorithm is going to calculate that all for you down when we release that. But for now, that's how we've been doing it on a consultative model anyway. So.
Yeah, I'm excited for that to roll out. And we also need to have a conversation about appropriate compensation for people. It should not be tied to these numbers. So definitely don't hear us say that. But
yeah,
appropriately
compensation should still,
people.
I mean, Yeah, I think from a compensation standpoint, it shouldn't change the compensation, because when you're looking at it from a business owner perspective, it's like that. Would you rather have an up and down performance because the person keeps burning out and then doing too little, or if you have steady, consistent? I mean, think about this way, okay? You've got a 25 energy producing 5 widgets of sales a month. You've got a 35 energy with producing like 10 widget sales per month. Okay, yeah, one's doing more for the bottom line than the other. But if they're both sustainably performing at that same level reliably, month after month after month, how predictable and how scalable is the business? Scalability isn't about how much money you can stuff into the coffers. Scalability is understanding how reliable all those metrics that you're getting month after month after month, because then you know what the leverage points are to scale, right? People are missing that. They get caught up in this distortion of capitalism of stuff as much money, just make as much money as possible at any cost. Yeah, that's the key word right there. What cost? At the cost of your ability to scale effectively and predictably? I don't know if it's worth it.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, scalability is in its purest form is the separation of revenue and expenses. If we can disassociate those two and grow revenue exponentially, but keep our expenses relatively flat, or grow them at a smaller percentage, you have scalability. If you have inconsistency, you have things that are unpredictable, you're hiring, firing, and churning through people, see you later. You're never going to grow your company.
There's no way. I don't care how much money you're making, you're not going to be able to sustain it, because you have no way to track and figure out what are the leverage points of growth, right?
Yeah. All right, speed round. We got to jump over to polarity, perception of life. Excuse me. We have positive, neutral, negative polarity. Ton of misunderstandings from this section of the app as well. Let's talk to me about the geekery of this section.
Yeah, I love this one, because the way I often describe it to people of how we came to these numbers, again, the genius behind what Dr. Zana created afforded us the ability to understand the average ratio of positive and negative ions that at any given point in time exists in your ecosystem of self. If we remember from science, as long as you're alive and there's things happening, positive and negative ions need to exist in the same space. However, it doesn't mean that everybody has the exact same ratios of positive to negative ions, right? If you have more positive than negative ions, obviously you become more positively charged. If you have more negative ions, okay, than positive ions, then you're going to become more negatively charged. And if there's a little bit more equal, like we like to call it, from -7 to +7, that whole range right there actually gets broken down even more finer doing our compatibility matrix development, algorithm development lately. But then you be considered a neutral charge, a more neutral charge, even though you have positive or negative biases in there. So we'll say neutral charge with a positive bias, neutral charge with a negative bias, right? And so from that understanding, we're like, wow, well, how does that even impact the human being? Well, it turns out, because negatively charged people are drawn to what it makes sense, things that aren't working, they're more problem focused. Positively charged people, because they're more drawn to things that are working, they're more solution focused than they are problem focused. And what that then we realized, then it impacted through our research and norms and data and observations of humanity as a whole. Positively charged people tend to have a more positive outlook. Okay, so and this actually also plays out on a nationwide level. So you see certain countries tend to be more positively charged. I'll give you one guess what America is, right? America tends to be a little bit more cheerleader, rah, stay positive, positively charged. Okay, I don't care.
Germany?
Yeah, Germany tends to be a little bit more negatively charged, right? And you can tell by the way the majority, like if you look at how the physical characteristics tends to present themselves over there, you'll see that, yeah, there's a higher concentration of negatively charged or even neutrally charged with a negative bias human beings there. And so what'll happen is that when human beings don't understand that there is a polarity charge at play that impacts how people show up in the world, we will judge and we will prejudge. And then the sad thing is, if the other person doesn't understand their polarity either, they might grow up just saying, fine, that's just who and what I am. And they will not allow themselves to explore the entire spectrum of what they are. Because even if you're positively, neutral, or negatively charged, that just impacts how you initially react or respond to certain situations. It doesn't mean the positive person doesn't see it from a negative perspective. It just means that you're weighted in the front in the positive, and eventually, as you continue to express, you will get into the negative side, just like nature, positive to negative, right? If we want to go even deeper into that, every molecule going down to the atomic size of it, you got protons in the middle and you've got negative electrons floating around the outside. One of the things we had to explore when we were building out the algorithm recently is that the electrons are smaller than protons. So what is the direction typically a negatively charged person will go towards, and what will the positive person do, even though there's a positive negative charge? So these are the things that the little bit of the geekery to understand just how it then shows up when it's all aggregated into the fully fledged human being, right? Negatively charged people get a bad rap in America because they tend to see and express what's not working first. And those are the people that often spend their entire lives fighting off the masses of America going, you got to be more positive. You got to be more optimistic. And as we know, not everybody has that nuclear force driver or access to that trait, of effervescence that has optimism in it. So sometimes they don't have that and they're negatively charged. And so they either pretend to be more negatively charged or pretend to be more positively charged, which is inauthentic to them, or they buy into this constant thing so that they can preemptively, just like what Eminem does in 8 Mile, he just preemptively cuts himself down so that nobody else knows how to cut him down. And so the negatively charged person will lead with the fact that I'm just a cynic. I'm just a critic. And they will go through a whole life. But then what happens is it becomes inauthentically them because they don't give themselves the opportunity to fully express their negative polarity. And when that's exhausted, they will actually talk about the positivity. They just have never been given enough time to fully express themselves before they get to the positive charge. I had one of my brother-in-law is actually extremely negatively charged. And one of the things that he, I think he mentioned one time to my sister, he enjoys me visiting because it feels like I get him. I said, well, I get that he's negatively charged. So the conversations typically starts off like talking about everything that's wrong. I'm drinking like this water with like apple cider vinegar. And he says, oh, I used to do that till it burns a hole in your stomach. I'm like, oh, really? Ah, okay. And I'm doing all this, but I know I'm just listening. And about 30 to 45 minutes in, he'll say something like, oh, back when we had a restaurant, he goes, oh, did your sister tell you that we're putting up kiosks in the front of the restaurant so people can kind of check in on their own and also maybe pre-order, and it'll just make everything more efficient. I said, you're not negative anymore, talking about positive. He's done.
We made the transition.
But think, how many people in America especially are willing to go through 30 minutes plus of negativity?
Nobody.
Just so that we can go allow that person to authentically fully express themselves. Right. Yeah. And this is hoping that they are also keeping themselves optimized during the day. Right.
Yeah. I will say that that person is a real asset on your team in a business context. We'll dive more into that on future episodes. So we got a minute before we both have to be somewhere else. So let's speed. Last 2 questions. I just want to get a sense. So when people are looking at the app, kind of where they fall on the spectrum, what is the highest perception of life you've seen and what's the lowest that you've seen?
So
roughly?
The highest perception of life that I've seen, so mine is pretty high. It's a plus 14.
Yeah, mine's plus 13. So we're dangerous together.
Yeah. So usually from 14 and above, that's when it requires a little bit more attention, because if it's too positive, it tends to come off too cheerleader, Pollyanna. It's a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it has a propensity to really not just miss, but completely ignore the negative components of something that may happen. We're talking about, it takes optimism to a whole new level. It's like beyond. It almost distorts if you're not paying attention. The lowest I've ever seen is -8. And what happens is, because of, there's something that happens on the negative charge when you go from 0 down to -1, -2, the increments of impact from -1, -2 to -3 is significantly higher than from +1, +2, +3. So those who have negatively charged, just recognize that going from -1 to -2 is a pretty big jump, and from -2 to -3 is a pretty big jump. Where we say 14 or more requires, a little bit more maintenance and understanding, and an investment in truly understanding how to manage and dial it up or down depending on the situation. When on the negative charge side, from -4 on, is when human beings really need to observe themselves, have that self-awareness of knowing what to dial in. You can literally learn how to dial up or down the positive, negative charge. And that's the mastery component that we can dive in deeper later to help people understand, how do you master your perception of life to best match the moment that you're in, right?
Yeah, love that. That episode coming soon to ear holes near you. I've lost that one. Anyway, what is the question of the day that we need to go into the app and ask Hai about either our perception of life or our energy pools?
Yeah. For energy pool, you can ask Hai this. You can ask Hai, what is the best amount of tasks that can support my energy pool, right? Or if you already have a to-do list of what you want to do today, ask Hai. It's like, is this too much? Is this list of things to do too much for my current energy pool size, right? For the perception side of things, and you can ask questions like, how do I manage my, if you're going to a group meeting where your positive charge or negative charge or neutral charge, well, neutral is more like a little bit delay and balance in terms of how they express themselves. But if you're more positive, more negatively charged, you can ask, how do I best utilize my perception of life in this upcoming meeting, right? Or how do I learn how to manage dialing up or down my perception of life based on a situation? Or when is a situation where I need to adjust and understand my perception of life better so as to not jeopardize or create challenges in a situation?
I love it. Go to the app, go ask those 2 questions.
Ask
This
Hai.
was fun. Speed round, but we got through it. We got to run, not with scissors, because that's dangerous. The only time you should run with scissors is while you're listening to this podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us. Drop your questions in the comments. We will get back to you. I promise. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Running with Scissors. Have you downloaded the HumanOp app yet? Head over to humanop.com to experience the power of this technology for yourself. See you on the next episode of Running with Scissors.